This is Emmy Stories, and today's story is one of the deepest betrayals imaginable. A woman gives everything to her husband, only to find out he's in love with her mother. But this isn't just about heartbreak. It's about rising from the ashes. This is her story, raw, real, unforgettable. Let's dive in. It was 2:14 a.m. when Grace turned over in bed and reached for Daniel, only to find empty sheets. Again, she stared at the ceiling, blinking into the darkness. She didn't know when the silence between them had grown so loud. When they first got married, Daniel couldn't keep his hands off her. He would sneak up behind her while she was cooking, whispering things that made her blush like a teenager. But now, he barely kissed her goodnight. The house was quiet, too quiet. She swung her legs off the bed, wrapping her robe around her waist as she stepped into the hallway. Downstairs, the TV flickered. Daniel sat on the couch, wearing only his boxers and a white vest, staring blankly at a muted football match. "You're still awake?" she asked softly. He flinched slightly. Couldn't sleep. Grace lingered in the doorway. "Do you want to come to bed?" "I'm fine here," he replied without looking at her. She stood for a moment, her eyes lingering on his jawline, the way his fingers tapped the remote in slow frustration. This wasn't him. Not the man she married. Not the Daniel who held her like she was treasure. "Are we okay?" she asked, breaking the silence. Daniel finally looked at her. "Grace, I'm tired. Can we not do this tonight?" Her chest tightened. "Do what?" "This." He gestured vaguely. "The talking. The overthinking. You're always in your feelings." She felt the sting, but nodded anyway. "Okay. Good night." He didn't reply. She turned and walked back upstairs, the weight in her chest growing heavier with each step. When she got back to bed, she reached for her phone and opened her chat with Lily, her best friend and emotional crutch. She typed, "He's acting strange again. This is the third time this week he's slept downstairs." Lily replied almost instantly, "Sis, are you sure it's just stress? Or is there someone else?" Grace stared at the message, her stomach knotting. The thought had crossed her mind more times than she could admit, but she hated how easily suspicion had started to feel like truth. The next morning, Grace made breakfast in silence. Scrambled eggs, toast, and Daniel's favorite, spiced tea with honey. He came into the kitchen wearing his usual crisp blue shirt and black slacks, hair brushed, cologne on. "Morning," she said, placing the mug in front of him. "Morning," he muttered, grabbing his keys off the counter. "Aren't you going to eat?" "I have a meeting. I'll grab something on the way." She tried to hide her hurt. "Will you be home for dinner?" "Not sure," he said. "Don't wait up." Grace stood by the kitchen counter long after he left, feeling like a shadow in her own home. Later that day, her mother, Helen, came over. Helen looked stunning. As usual, red lipstick, flawless curls, a white jumpsuit that hugged her curves. No one ever believed she had a daughter as old as Grace. "I just came to check on my baby," Helen said, giving her a long, sweet-smelling hug. "You've been so quiet." Grace rested her head on her mother's shoulder. "I don't know what's happening, Mom." Daniel's distant. Helen gently stroked her daughter's back. "Men go through phases. Maybe you just need space." Grace pulled away. "Space? We're married, not roommates." Helen chuckled. "True, but you know Daniel. He bottles things up. Don't push too hard." As Grace sighed and leaned against the kitchen island, she didn't notice the glint in her mother's eye or the way her phone buzzed silently in her purse. She also didn't notice that Daniel's name was saved under D with a heart beside it. The first time Grace noticed it, she thought she was imagining things. Daniel had just walked into the house after work, loosened his tie, and kissed her on the forehead, a lazy peck, like someone ticking a box. But as he leaned past her to drop his keys on the table, she caught a faint whiff. Vanilla and jasmine. Soft. Familiar. Too familiar. She froze. That was Helen's perfume. Grace blinked hard, pushing the thought away. Maybe it was hers. Maybe she sprayed it last week. Maybe he walked past a woman at work. Maybe... "Everything okay?" Daniel asked. She forced a smile. "Yeah, just tired." He nodded. I'm going to take a quick shower. And just like that, he vanished up the stairs. Grace stood there, her heart racing. She walked to the hallway mirror, lifted her wrist, and sniffed her own skin. No trace of vanilla. She hadn't worn that scent in over a year. She stopped when her mother gifted her the bottle and said it was too mature for her. That night, she lay in bed with her back to Daniel. He scrolled through his phone with the brightness low. His face lit up in flickers. "Who are you texting this late?" she asked casually. "Work. We have a campaign launch tomorrow." She nodded slowly, eyes staring at the dark wall ahead. "I ran into your mom earlier," he added. "She said she might stop by again this week." Grace didn't respond immediately. "You two talk often?" Daniel shrugged. "She checks in sometimes. You know she worries about you." Grace's stomach twisted. "Didn't realize she worried about you too." He chuckled lightly. "You're being paranoid again." "No, I'm just observant." He didn't answer. A few days later, Lily dragged Grace out to a coffee shop. She said Grace needed fresh air, perspective, and a break from emotional prison. "You're acting like a houseplant that's been overwatered," Lily joked, sipping her iced latte. "Where's the Grace that used to light up when she talked about him?" "I don't know," Grace admitted. "She's gone quiet." Lily tilted her head. "Be honest. You still think he's just tired from work?" Grace stirred her drink slowly. "There's something off. Something I can't explain. He smells like her, Lily nearly choked. "Who?" Grace looked around, leaned in, and whispered, "My mom." Lily blinked. "Wait, what?" "I'm telling you, Lily. Twice now. Same perfume. And they act too familiar around each other. You don't think." Grace didn't answer. She didn't want to say it. Not out loud. Not yet. That evening, Grace got home early and decided to surprise Daniel with his favorite dinner: peppered chicken, jollof rice, and fried plantains. Maybe if they just talked, if they shared a meal, maybe things would ease back into normal. She heard his car pull into the driveway and quickly adjusted her dress. As the door opened, she stepped into the hallway with a soft smile. But he didn't come in alone. Helen was with him. Grace blinked. "Mom." Helen smiled. "Oh, don't be alarmed. I was just passing through and ran into Daniel outside. He offered me a lift home." Daniel nodded like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Your mom says she hasn't seen the new restaurant by the roundabout, so we grabbed a quick bite." Grace's throat dried up. "You two went out?" Helen laughed. "Nothing fancy. Just a quick stop. You know how Lagos traffic is. Better to wait out over food than sit in the car." Daniel chimed in. "She tells the funniest stories, your mom." Grace just stood there. Her hands trembled slightly, hidden by the folds of her dress. She didn't know what hurt more, the lie in his voice or the ease in her mother's. Grace didn't sleep that night. Daniel was snoring softly beside her, turned away as usual. She lay stiff on the edge of the bed, eyes wide open, mind racing like traffic on a Lagos expressway after rain. Her pillow smelled like fabric softener, and something else, a subtle trace of lipstick. That same red stain she'd seen just barely on the edge of the white pillowcase earlier. She had almost missed it when fluffing the pillows that evening, a faint smudge. But she didn't wear red lipstick. Her mother did. Always. Grace stared at the spot in the dim moonlight, her breath shallow. She didn't want to believe it. No, it was probably hers from weeks ago. Maybe it transferred from one of Helen's hugs. Maybe, always maybe. The next morning, Daniel left before she even woke up. He used to kiss her forehead. Now he just closed the door softly and vanished. Grace walked to the laundry basket and pulled out the pillowcase. The red mark was still there, almost mocking her. She sniffed it. That same vanilla jasmine blend filled her nose, that unmistakable perfume her mother bathed in. Her hands shook. She tossed the pillowcase back in and sat on the edge of the bed. Her eyes burned, but the tears refused to fall. This wasn't sadness anymore. It was confusion, suspicion, humiliation. She picked up her phone and called Lily. 10 minutes later, Grace sat in Lily's car outside a pharmacy. It was raining lightly, and the windshield wipers moved in slow, irritated beats. You found lipstick on your pillow, and you're still asking if something is wrong. Lily asked, jaw tight. I don't want to jump to conclusions, Grace muttered. Lily sighed. Grace, wake up. Your mom and your husband are sneaking around, and you're playing a supportive daughter and devoted wife at the same time. You can't be both. Grace rested her head against the window. She's my mother, Lily. That's not even a possible thought in my head. It's disgusting. Lily cut in. Exactly. Which is why you're struggling. But girl, people are capable of mess up things. Even family. That evening, Grace decided to test something. She told Daniel she was going to church for choir rehearsal, even though she hadn't sung in months. She wanted to see if he would ask to come, offer a ride, or even blink. He didn't. All right, be safe, he said, eyes glued to his phone. Do you want me to bring anything back? No, I'm good. As she picked up her bag, she stepped quietly outside, then waited behind the gate, just out of view. 5 minutes passed. 10. Then Daniel came out, checked his watch, and made a call. He was too far away to hear clearly, but Grace could make out one thing. He smiled. He never smiled at her like that anymore. She followed him. Daniel's car parked outside a gated guest house in Surrey. Grace stayed hidden behind a kiosk across the street, heart in her throat. 10 minutes later, a woman stepped out of a boat ride in a long brown coat, large sunglasses, and high heels. But Grace would recognize those curls anywhere. It was Helen, her mother, her own mother. Grace covered her mouth, bile rising in her throat. Helen glanced around once, not nervously but casually, and walked to the gate like she'd done it before, like she belonged there. Daniel met her just inside the door. He touched her back softly as they disappeared into the building. Grace stood in the rain, frozen. The betrayal wasn't just real. It was alive, breathing, and walking hand in hand into a hotel. Grace didn't go home that night. She wandered the city streets in Lily's car, unable to speak. Her mind locked in a loop of that image. Daniel and Helen disappearing behind the guest house door. Her own mother, the woman who raised her, the man who vowed to love her. How long? How dare they? What did I do to deserve this? The next morning, Grace stood in front of the bathroom mirror with swollen eyes and a face she barely recognized. She hadn't spoken to Daniel yet. He had texted her at 11:49 p.m. Got a late call with the team. Crashing at the office. Don't wait up. Grace didn't reply, but she had a plan. By noon, she was back at the house, calm on the outside but shaking on the inside. Daniel returned just before 2 p.m., dressed in his Friday casuals, jeans, sneakers, and that cologne she used to love. Hey, he said, kissing her cheek like nothing was wrong. Grace smiled faintly. You look tired. Long night, he muttered. Work's been a lot. He tossed his phone on the couch and walked into the kitchen to grab a drink. That's when Grace saw her chance. His phone, unlocked, face down. She picked it up, heart pounding, and turned it over. Still unlocked. She opened the messages. There was a thread named D. Kissmark. Her hands trembled as she tapped it. D. Kissmark. Last night was beautiful. I miss your arms. Daniel, you looked stunning. You always do. D. Kissmark. She doesn't suspect? Daniel, not even a little. She still thinks I'm just stressed. D. Kissmark. Good. Don't rush. Let her think it's her fault. The guilt will make her easier to push out. Daniel, it's working. She even asked if I was okay yesterday. Pathetic. Grace's lungs emptied. She scrolled further, a photo attachment. Helen, sitting on a hotel bed, wearing a silk robe. Her mother. She nearly dropped the phone. Daniel walked back in, sipping from a glass. Looking for something? Grace's head snapped up. You left your phone out. He raised a brow. And you decided to go through it? She held it up, voice shaking. Who is D. Kissmark? His face shifted. Not guilt. Annoyance. Grace, he said calmly, you invaded my privacy. Her mouth fell open. Your privacy? You're cheating on me. With my mother. Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. You're being dramatic. Oh, am I? So the photos, the messages, are they fiction? He sighed, like a man tired of babysitting a child. Your mother is different. She understands things you don't. Things about life, success, partnership. You're just a girl who wanted playhouse. Her face flushed with rage and humiliation. I gave up everything to be with you. And you were a good choice for a while, he added coldly. But Helen and I, we have real chemistry. Power attracts power. Tears rolled down Grace's cheeks. You planned this. You both did. Daniel shrugged. She came to me first. That broke something in her. She slapped him, hard. Daniel stared at her for a moment, his jaw clenching. Then he smirked. You've just made things easier. He turned and walked out, leaving her shaking in the center of the living room. Heart in pieces, world spinning, and one truth echoing louder than any scream. They planned to destroy her. Together, the silence in the house was deafening. Grace sat curled on the floor, clutching her knees like a child. The documents lay flat on the coffee table, white, sharp, and heartless. Daniel hadn't just decided to leave. He had prepared to leave. She found the divorce papers hours later, neatly sealed in a brown envelope, buried beneath the drawer where he kept old receipts and forgotten chargers. Her name was already signed. By her. Grace blinked at the signature over and over again. It wasn't hers. Not her handwriting. Not her pen. But the signature was there. Her full name, her consent, her permission. She was being erased. She rushed to the lawyer's office listed on the document the next morning. The receptionist looked up with a professional smile. Good morning. Do you have an appointment? I don't, Grace replied, breathing heavily. But I need to speak to Mr. Blake. It's urgent. My name is Grace. The woman tapped her keyboard. Grace Daniels. Yes, the paperwork is complete. I believe your mother handled the final steps on your behalf. Grace blinked. My mother? Yes, Mrs. Helen. She provided a notarized power of attorney form. Power of attorney? Her heart dropped. Flashback. A few months ago, her mother had handed her a bundle of papers. Just sign here, baby. It's something to protect your assets. I spoke to a lawyer on your behalf. Grace hadn't even read them. She had trusted her. She had signed. Now, it was being used to file her own divorce. She stormed out of the office, barely able to walk straight. Lily was waiting in the car. What happened? She asked, eyes wide with concern. She signed the divorce on my behalf. My mother did that. Lily's jaw dropped. That's illegal. That has to be... No, Grace cut in, voice hoarse. She made me give her power of attorney months ago. I thought it was something to protect me. Lily shook her head. Grace, this is evil. Grace nodded slowly, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only stable thing left in her life. They wanted me gone. Quietly, legally, without a fight. Back home, Daniel was waiting. He stood in the living room like he owned the air, sipping orange juice. So, he said, not even blinking, you know now. Grace stared at him. You both forged my freedom. Daniel set the glass down. It's not forgery if you gave consent. You just didn't know what you were signing. That's on you. She took a step forward, trembling. Why her? Why my mother? His answer was cold. She's the kind of woman who builds empires. You're the kind of girl who wants fairy tales. Grace let out a broken laugh. And you? You're the kind of man who uses women to feel powerful. Daniel shrugged. Call it what you want. But in 2 weeks, I'll be married to a woman who knows her worth. Grace stared at him, chest heaving. Then enjoy the wedding. But just know this. One day, you'll choke on everything you built on broken trust. He stepped closer, trying to tower over her. No one will believe you, Grace. They'll just think you were too immature to handle marriage. She smiled bitterly. Then I'll stop trying to prove anything. I'll let the truth rot both of you from the inside. That night, she packed her bags. No tears. No begging. No explanations. She left a single sticky note on the mirror. Thank you for setting me free. It arrived in a gold-trimmed envelope. No knock. No delivery man. just sitting there at her doorstep, like a final insult from the universe. Grace stared at it for a long time. The envelope had her name on it, handwritten in perfect script. No return address. Just a thin white card inside that read, Daniel and Helen joyfully invite you to celebrate their union. She didn't read the rest. Her fingers trembled as she folded it back and placed it gently on the kitchen counter, like it might explode if handled too roughly. This wasn't just betrayal. This was humiliation with a bow on it. Lily stormed in 10 minutes later. "He invited you to the wedding," she shouted, holding the card like it burned her hand. This is next-level evil. What is he trying to prove? Grace sat on the couch, her face blank. "I think he wants me to see it." "See what?" "That he won. That I lost. That I wasn't woman enough for him, but my mother was." Lily dropped onto the chair opposite her. "You're not going, right? Please tell me you're not going." Grace didn't answer, because in her heart, she already knew. She had to go. A week passed. The wedding was set for Saturday at a private garden estate in Lecky. Socialites, journalists, distant cousins, everyone invited. Grace spent the week drifting through her days. Quiet, dignified, numb. But the night before the wedding, she stood in front of the mirror, brushing her hair back slowly. Her eyes stared back, not empty anymore. Focused, cold. She picked the black dress. The one Daniel always had made her look too serious. Good. She wanted to look like a storm. On the day of the wedding, Grace arrived alone. No Lily, no family, just her and the weight of everything they stole. The venue was dreamy. White roses, gold chairs, a violinist playing soft love songs. It looked like a fairy tale. She stood at the back, hidden behind oversized sunglasses. Then the music changed. The guests stood, and out came Helen. Grace's heart clenched. Her mother, no, that woman, was glowing in a white silk gown, face beaming with pride. Her hair was swept up, her smile rehearsed. But it was the look she gave Daniel that shattered Grace's breath. She looked at him like he was hers, like he had always been. Daniel, in a sharp gray suit, lifted her hand and kissed it softly. Cameras flashed, and Grace stood there, completely invisible. The ceremony went on, and the pastor said things like, "New beginnings and God's divine will." Grace nearly laughed. But then, the final blow. Helen took the mic, glowing with grace, and said, "I know this may come as a surprise to some, but Daniel has always been close to our family. What started as friendship grew into something deeper. I truly believe love finds us in unexpected ways." The crowd clapped. Grace stood frozen. She wasn't mentioned. Not once. Not as Daniel's ex-wife. Not as Helen's daughter. She was air. Gone. Rewritten out of their story like she'd never existed. She turned around and walked away. Not crying. Not today. Today. She had witnessed the performance. But tomorrow? Tomorrow, she would start exposing the script behind it. The wedding was barely 48 hours old when Grace received the file. An anonymous email. No subject. No text. Just a PDF attachment labeled Helen _backstory PDF. She hesitated. For a second, she almost deleted it. But curiosity clawed at her. She downloaded the file. What she found made her entire body go cold. Inside were court documents. Helen, her own mother, had once been charged with fraud, manipulation, and property theft during her 20s. The details were buried deep in legal records from another state. That's why Grace had never heard of them. Photos, too. Helen standing beside a much older man. And another man, Daniel, but younger, maybe in his early 20s. Maybe before Grace even turned 10. She zoomed in. Helen had known Daniel long, before Grace ever met him. It was never an accident. The introductions, the flirtation, the betrayal. They weren't just lovers. They had a history. Grace couldn't breathe. She called Lily immediately. "You won't believe what I just found." Lily rushed over in 20 minutes, hair undone and barefoot in slippers. Grace showed her the documents. Lily flipped through them, speechless. "Wait, your mom and Daniel, they've been in each other's lives since." Before me, Grace whispered. Which means they used me, she said, barely blinking. I wasn't some innocent casualty. I was a step in their plan. Flashback. 2 years ago, Helen had insisted Grace attend Daniel's company dinner. She dressed her up, bought her a designer dress, coached her on what to say. Men like confidence, she had said. That night, Grace remembered how Daniel kept glancing at Helen. Not her. She thought it was admiration. But now, she realized it had been code. Grace began digging. She contacted the lawyer who had drafted the original power of attorney. He didn't return her call. She called her aunt, Helen's estranged younger sister. After a long pause, her aunt finally said, Helen was always clever, beautiful, manipulative. She ruined men like it was a sport. I always warned your father, but he never listened. She plays long games, Grace. And I'm afraid you were her longest one yet. Grace's hands went cold. Even her childhood had been a lie. She sat on her bed that night, lights off, staring into nothing. They had planned everything. Her marriage, her heartbreak, her silence. But now she had proof. Photos, dates, evidence. And the one thing neither of them expected her to ever have again, strength. The next morning, Grace printed the documents. She placed them in a brown envelope and walked calmly into Daniel's company office, makeup flawless, head held high. The receptionist tried to stop her, but Grace didn't flinch. She walked right into the executive lounge and found Daniel sipping espresso and laughing with 2 clients. He froze when he saw her. Grace. She smiled. Morning. She handed him the envelope. What's this? The end of your empire. And hers. He glanced inside, saw the papers, and his eyes darkened. You're bluffing. No, Grace said quietly. I'm finally telling the truth. Helen stood in front of the mirror, smoothing the collar of her silk blouse. She looked flawless, as always. The new Mrs. Daniels. Wealthy, admired, untouchable. But then her phone buzzed. A message from a private number. Check your inbox, Helen. It's your turn now. Attached was a photo. Her and Daniel in a hotel room. Years ago. Time-stamped. Dated. 3 years before Grace ever met him. Another photo. Court papers. Her criminal past. The one she paid to have buried. Helen's hand started to shake. Downstairs, Daniel barged and holding the envelope Grace had delivered. You told me this was all gone, he hissed. You said you destroyed everything. Helen grabbed the papers. I did. I swear. Someone must have been watching us. Someone from the past. It's not someone from the past. Daniel snapped. It's Grace. Helen went still. What? She knows everything. The documents. The history. Us. Before her. Helen sat down, suddenly pale. She was never supposed to know. She's threatening to go public. Helen's eyes narrowed. She won't. She doesn't have the guts. Daniel didn't respond, because deep down, he knew she did. Meanwhile, Grace was sitting in her aunt's living room. Photos were spread across the coffee table. Lily paced back and forth. Are you sure about this? Lily asked. Grace nodded. I don't want revenge. I want truth. They rewrote my story. It's time I take the pen back. Her aunt added softly, people like Helen only survive when no one talks. She's made a career out of silence. Grace looked at the photos. Not anymore. By Monday, the whispers began. At first, it was an anonymous blog post. The businesswoman who stole her daughter's husband. Then a gossip account shared screenshots. Before she was his wife, she was his mistress. Helen's name trended on social media for all the wrong reasons. Old contacts stopped picking up. Brands pulled sponsorship deals. The same women who once called her inspiring now called her poison. Daniel's company faced backlash too. Clients canceled contracts. A board meeting was called. Suddenly, power couple became public scandal. Helen sat in her dressing room, staring at herself in the mirror again. But this time, she didn't look polished. She looked cracked. The lipstick was smeared. The eyeshadow too heavy. The woman in the mirror wasn't in control anymore. Daniel walked in, tense. The board wants me to step down for now. Damage control. Thanks to you. Helen scoffed. Don't blame me. You could have walked away any time. He glared. I left my wife for you. And I gave up everything for you. They stared at each other. Two people bound not by love, but by ruin. Then Daniel said it. Quietly, carefully. She's stronger than you thought. Helen didn't reply, because he was right. That night, Grace received a message. Let's talk. One last time. No tricks. Just truth. Helen. Grace stared at the screen. For a moment, she considered deleting it, but then she typed. The restaurant was nearly empty. Helen had reserved a private booth in the corner, a table for two, lit by a soft pendant lamp. She wore no makeup, no jewelry, just a plain black dress. For the first time in her life, Grace saw her mother not as an icon, but as a woman. Thank you for coming, Helen said quietly as Grace sat down. Grace didn't respond. She just stared. Helen took a breath. Before you say anything, just let me speak. You have 5 minutes, Grace said coldly. Helen nodded. Fair. I never planned to fall for Daniel, she began. But it didn't start with him. It started with your father. Grace's eyes narrowed. What about Dad? Helen looked down at her hands. He wasn't your biological father. Silence. Grace blinked. What? Helen swallowed hard. I met your real father when I was 21. He was a married man, wealthy, promised to leave his wife. He never did. I got pregnant. He paid me off and disappeared. I was alone, shamed, desperate. She looked up, eyes glossy. Then I met James, the man who raised you. He was kind, simple. He loved me, and he accepted you without question. Grace's voice trembled. You lied to me my entire life? I thought I was protecting you, Helen said. But the truth is, I've always used love like a weapon, a way to survive. Grace sat back, stunned. Her whole identity had just shifted. I always thought you resented me, she said. You controlled everything. What I wore, how I spoke, who I dated. I thought you wanted perfection. I wanted control, Helen admitted. Because when I lost control, I lost everything. Is that why you stole my husband? Helen flinched. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. I was lonely. Daniel came to me first. After you two started having problems. He complained. He confided in me. And I let it happen. Grace clenched her jaw. So you betrayed me because you were bored? No, Helen whispered. Because deep down I was jealous. Of your youth, your hope, the kind of love I thought I missed out on. Tears streamed down Grace's face. You didn't just break my heart, Mom. You broke me. Helen reached across the table, but Grace pulled away. You don't get to touch me, she said. Helen's voice cracked. I know, but I need you to know something. The blog, the scandal, I deserved it. But Daniel, he's worse than you think. Grace froze. What do you mean? He was using me to get back at a former investor, your biological father. Grace's eyes widened. What? Helen nodded slowly. Daniel found out who your real father was. And when he learned what your birth meant, the inheritance you didn't even know about, he played both of us. He targeted me to get to you. Grace stared, numb. So I wasn't the only pawn. You were, too. Helen gave a bitter smile. The student outplayed the teacher. They sat in silence. 2 women, 2 betrayals, bound by blood, torn by lies. Grace stood up slowly. Thank you for the truth, she said, voice steady. But this doesn't fix anything. Helen's eyes filled with tears. I know. I don't hate you, Grace added, but I'll never let you near my healing. She turned and walked out, for the first time in her life, fully in control. It had been 6 months since Grace walked away. The headlines had faded. The whispers died down. Helen and Daniel had gone quiet. Out of sight, off the radar. Rumor had it they moved out of Lagos to escape the scandal. Grace didn't care. She had stopped tracking their lives the day she chose to rewrite her own. She now lived in a modest but cozy apartment on the island. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers. She had returned to school, re-enrolled in a writing program, and started sharing her story, not online, but in journals, short stories, and essays. Words became her therapy. Her truth became her power. One morning, she received a letter hand-delivered, no return address. Again, inside was a single note. I've lost everything, but I'm glad you didn't. I hope you live free. Mom. Grace folded the note, placed it in a drawer, and didn't cry. Forgiveness didn't mean access. Healing didn't mean reunion. She could accept the past without reopening the wound. Later that day, she gave a speech at her school's women's empowerment event. Lily stood proudly in the audience, beaming. Grace took the podium and inhaled deeply. When I was younger, she began, I thought love was supposed to save me, that if I gave enough, sacrificed enough, stayed silent enough, I would be chosen. She paused, eyes scanning the room. But what I've learned is this: love that requires you to shrink yourself, to lie for it, or lose yourself for it, isn't love. It's control. Murmurs of agreement rose from the crowd. I lost my marriage. I lost my relationship with my mother. I even lost the image I had of myself. But I didn't lose me. Not truly. Because beneath the silence, beneath the pain, there was always a voice waiting to be heard. And today it's speaking. Applause followed, but Grace didn't smile for them. She smiled for herself. That evening, she walked alone to the beach. A soft breeze carried the scent of salt and peace. She sat in the sand, opened her journal, and wrote the words she had never been brave enough to write before. I was not weak. I was lied to, and now I live wide awake. A little girl passed by, chasing the tide. Her laughter filled the air. Grace looked up at the sunset, then whispered to herself, I'm free. Not because they apologized, not because justice came, but because she chose to stop letting pain write her story. She was no longer her mother's shadow. She was no longer her ex-husband's casualty. She was Grace, rewritten. Betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from those you once called home. But Grace didn't let it define her. She walked away and walked into her freedom. To anyone learning to heal in silence, your voice still matters. This is Emmy Stories. If this touched you, tap subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and come back for more stories that remind you, broken doesn't mean finished.